Well, welcome to our first service 2025. And if you're here for the first time, my name's Simon and I'm the lead minister here, and it's just great to be here to start another year with you guys. Now, just before I start, I just want to give you a heads up on something that's happening in a couple of weeks' time. We have a really special guest with us, a guy called Mark Greenwood, and I've known Mark for quite a few years now. He's actually he's a friend of my brother-in-law and sister-in-law. He's a friend of Ben's as well, actually. Well, everyone is, actually. Everyone you meet say, do you know Ben, if you come from Hucknall? But Mark's he's an evangelist, and he's quite a funny man, but he's really great at telling people the good news about Jesus. And he's coming for an initial visit. So firstly, he's coming in 2 weeks' time. And he's going to come to talk to us as a church family, actually, about how we can tell people about Jesus. And it will still be great to take your friends who don't know Jesus along, because he'll make sure it's relevant to them. And then later on the 28th, is it 28th of February? I haven't got my date down there, but we're using the canopy in the Griffin, and he's going to do what he calls a Christianity and comedy night, and he is fantastic. Yeah, he really is great, because he's quite a funny man, but actually he uses the comedy as a vehicle. One thing to show your friends that Christians aren't weird. Well, anyone other than me aren't weird, you know. Most Christians aren't weird, but also he plants the seed and gets the good news across, and he's just a top guy. I think you'll really like him. So make sure you'll be praying for that. 2 weeks' time, we've got Mark. Okay, well, as it's the new year, I thought we'd just see how we're getting on, because we're 5 days into the new year. So I want to find out how you're getting on with like your New Year's resolution. So get your phones out, get that QR code, and we're going to find out how you're getting on. Sorry?
Where's the option for our different Father setting?
I don't know, I can't understand what you're saying, sorry.
I didn't set any New Year's resolutions.
Oh, I see. Right, where's the option that I didn't set any? Yeah, sorry, I'm going a bit Mutt and Jeff there. That means deaf if you don't come from the south. Okay, right, let's try now. You should have that on your phone by now. Yeah, if you haven't set any, well, I'll have to take a straw poll on that afterwards. So, I kicked off. So we've got the things coming up there. Oh, they're on the screen. Oh, right, so they're there, but not there. Right. Okay, we've got 55% kicked off the year with some resolutions. Right, that's good. So who's sticking to them? Oh, 45, it's gone down. I don't know why it keeps changing. People must change their mind there. 48% are sticking to them. 38% kicked off the year. Only 14. Oh, it keeps changing. Isn't it amazing the way it keeps changing? Fascinating that. 17% have given up on them. Maybe you've given up on them while you're sitting there now. Well, that's really interesting. I just thought it'd be good just to see where we are. And we'll have that straw poll there. Who hasn't set any resolutions? That should have been an option, shouldn't it? I didn't think of that. Yeah. Okay, well, yeah, I didn't set a resolution. I gave up on them years ago. In fact, I probably was about 10 when I gave up on them. I wrote them down. I said, I will be good at school and work hard. I will be nice to my sister. I will take an interest in football. They were my resolutions. Well, when I went to school, I thought, oh, blow this from a larky, and carried on being my normal. Can you believe I was a troublesome pupil? You know, but my normal troublesome self, and made my teacher's life difficult. I went home, had a row with my sister, and I probably kicked her or something, so that was another one broken. And Saturday came, and I thought, right, let's get with the lads. I want to get with the lads. They like football. And I stood there on the pitch, and they said, Simon, how about you be the linesman? I can't think what I was supposed to do, but whatever I did, I completely messed up, and I went away sulking, and that was it. I never got into football again. And I've tried, you know, because it's a great way to chat to people, and you've probably heard me say before, we had the World Cup, one of the matches with England against Sweden being played. We put it on a big video screen, and I thought, right, just get with the guys and cheer when there's a goal. And then I went, yes, goal! And it was Sweden who scored. Yeah, so there we are. That's my New Year's resolution. They didn't work. But, you know, every January, people decide it's a good time to change something about themselves. And maybe you want to lose weight. I have. My friend Steve Brady says there's no one more self-righteous than a person who's just lost a load of weight, you know? Or change your finances, get out of debt, change your work-life balance, improve your relationship. And if you're a member of a gym, you usually find gyms get really busy in January. I used to do gyms, but I swim. That's my exercise now. I hate gyms, and I decided, let's just do something I enjoy, and I like swimming. But I always found in the gym, January, it was packed full. But all of us regulars said, don't worry, just give it 4 weeks and we'll be back to normal. And it usually was, everyone kind of dissipated. And the interesting thing is, that churches see a rise in attendance in January. I don't see the evidence of that this morning. The cold weather seems to have put people off, but that often happens. You get people coming in January, and maybe it's that instinct to start the year with something meaningful, with sense of renewal and purpose. And maybe actually you couldn't get out because of the snow and you're watching online and you think, I'll come next week. That's brilliant. We look forward to seeing you there. And I want to say, if you are here and you haven't been here before and you want to start off the new year coming here, brilliant. We're glad to see you. I'm not berating that in any way. How many of us step into January, though, with a sense of purpose, ready to reflect and refocus and restart, and then it doesn't take long and it all falls flat? Yeah, a new year feels like a fresh page, a chance to leave something behind, chase something new, or finally become the person you've started, and you're all excited. But of course the doubts already started creeping in, and I've probably sown that doubt into your minds now, because you think, last year I started the year like that, and the year before I started it like that. But what if this time it could be different? What if there's a way that we could figure it out together? Well, for the next few weeks, we're going to go through January, and then we've got a week's break when Mark comes, and into February. We're going to explore this in our series, Resolution or Re-Solution, because we can have a re-think about how we start New Year. And let's be honest, the basic question we ask ourselves at the beginning of the year is, how can I make my life better? Losing weight makes your life better. Sorry, I'm harping on about this. I'm ever so self-righteous and virtuous. But getting out of debt makes your life better. Improving your relationships, improves someone else's life, but improves your life as well. How can I be healthier? How can I stop buying so many records? That would make my life better, probably, because my wife wouldn't say, what have you got, when I come in with this bag, and kind of hide it. I've discovered these retro things called CDs as well, though, which are interesting, It's a good question, but it's not the best. I want to offer you a bigger, better question to start your year. One that can give your life deeper meaning and purpose, but it also might push you out of your comfort zone. But it's a question that could change your life. How can I make the world a better place? Now you might say, whoa, hang on a minute, that's a huge call. It's one thing to think about losing a bit of weight and getting out of debt and improving my relationship, but change the world? Well, let me give you a quote I found. It's actually adapted from something that Mother Teresa famously said, but it makes it applicable to us in a day-to-day setting. There's a guy called Dylan Burrows who was a Christian who campaigns for social justice. And he said, God is calling you to change the world one life at a time, and one small step at a time. So it's not a huge thing. So maybe we should change that question a bit and say, how can I make the world around me a better place? And please don't think I'm setting you an impossible challenge, because what I want to say right throughout this talk is big changes start with small acts. Let me give you an example. Do you know who this lady is? That is Rosa Parks, yeah. I am like one person away from Rosa Parks, because I was on a plane coming into Alabama, and there was this lovely African-American lady, a fairly elderly lady, Christian lady, chatting to me, and she told me about actually how she as a girl knew Rosa Parks, and how she lived in the same place in Alabama as Rosa Parks. So it was fascinating to hear about that amazing woman. But if you don't know about her, she lived in America. I don't know if she's still alive now, is she? But she was a young person during the 1950s in America, and at that time in the south of America, races were segregated. It was a very racist place. There were schools where black people went, there were schools where white people went, and black people were forced to sit at the back of buses, and the front was reserved for white passengers. But not just that, if the area for the white passengers got filled, a white person could just go to a black person and say, I want that seat, give it up. And one day Rosa Parks was sitting on the bus and she decided this was wrong. And a white man came to her and said, move. And she said no, politely, but she said no. And do you know what happened to her? She was arrested. But that one little word that led to her arrest challenged the whole system. It sparked a bus boycott that lasted over a year, inspiring people to fight for equality with justice, and changed America for good. Rosa Parks' story shows us something huge. Big changes start with small acts. That's how we make the world around us a better place. In this case, it began with one person deciding they weren't going to give in anymore. And it's proof that even small acts of courage can change the world. So you never know what ripple effect your small act might have. And we're going to see as we explore this some more that actually we're part of a bigger story. It's not just about your life and the people around you. What you do affects them and affects other people. And actually, when we look at it from a point of view of following Jesus, we see actually God uses these things to change the world and bring about his purposes. The small thing that you're doing. And at the end, I'm going to give you an example. The added bonus is that when you play your small part in a big story, it changes you. See, the problem is we go at it from the wrong way. We say, how can I change myself? But actually, when we think about changing the world around us and making that a better place, we actually change our lives because our whole outlook changes. See, if you want to become a better person, you need to make the world around you a better place. Because it's not about you. It's about what's going on about there. It's about other people. So I want to show you this through the life of a man who lived a long time ago. His name was Nehemiah. We heard about him from Rita just now. And well done with those names. I thought you did brilliantly. I couldn't have done as well as that. Sorry, you drew the short straw there, didn't you, with the reading? He was a great guy, a wonderful leader. And he lived in a time of crisis for God's people. Now, if you don't know the Bible's kind of divided into two parts. There's a big part that goes right from the beginning of time and gives the history of God's people, the Jewish people. And then there's just a little divider between them. And then it talks about Jesus and all that he's done and what he's going to do. And actually, that older part of the Bible is like one huge signpost towards Jesus. It's all fulfilled in him. So we see it in the light of Jesus. Now, one of the really interesting things about Nehemiah's story, and he records it in a kind of a journal in this book, is that it's not full of miracles and supernatural events. Other parts of the Old Testament are, but this isn't. It's about a man whose heart was broken by some news he heard. He stepped out of his comfort zone. He made a difference and became part of a bigger story. Now, bear with me because I need to take you there. It's 605 BC. And that was even before I was born. That was a long, long time ago. The kingdom of Judah, where the Jews were living, was attacked by the Babylonians. They were the unstoppable superpower of the day. They would have been a bit like Ukraine and the Russians coming on at them. Their capital city is Jerusalem, and it was destroyed. Its walls were ripped apart and the heart of the nation was shattered. And the Babylonians just took the whole nation out of the country and took them into exile. Most people were used as slaves, but they creamed off the brightest and the best and trained them so that they could be part of the civil service of that day. And Judah is left in ruins, particularly the capital, Jerusalem, defenseless, hopeless, broken. And 70 long years pass, a whole generation. And that generation grew up in exile, longing for a home they'd ever seen. And then something incredible happens. The Babylonians fall to an even greater empire, the Persians. And the king of Persia, Cyrus, looked at the displaced Jewish people and does the unthinkable. He says, why are you here? Let's send you home. Now, what he does, he does keep some of the cream for his own civil service. That's where Nehemiah, he stays in the palace. But most people go home. And imagine it. They go home and they're told to rebuild and restore what's lost. And you know what it's like? You go with hope. And you go with a sense of purpose. And, I know a lot of Syrian people. And they've talked to me about how beautiful the city of Aleppo used to be and their country was. And already, they're starting to think, is there a way we can get back and rebuild? Will there be peace and stability? That was the kind of the atmosphere here. But imagine their excitement when they were coming back. Finally, they're going home. Of course, there were no newsreels, there were no pictures, there was no YouTube to look at it. What did they find? Not a home for exiles, but a city in ruins. And rebuilding? Well, that was going to take a lot more than bricks and mortar. It was going to take grit, hard work, and faith. Now we zoom in on Nehemiah. Nehemiah is one of the people who've been creamed off. He's in Persia. He's working in the palace, and he's got a kind of edgy job, but a cushy job. He's the king's cupbearer. That means he has to make sure that the wine isn't poisonous. He probably sort of used to test it. So it's kind of living on the edge, you know. It's a nice life, but you could croak it any minute, couldn't you? And then, you're gone. It's like actually when having mother-in-law's cooking, which is kind of like Russian roulette. I'd never know which dish is going to kill me. It's a bit like that. Oh, actually, take that bit off the stream, I think. One day, someone from Jerusalem comes and visits him, and of course, you know what it's like when someone comes from home. You say, "How are things at home?" I often listen out. We've got. If you don't know, I don't come from up here. I come from Essex. We've got some Essex people here, and I'll say, "How's things in God's own county down there?" You all want to know how it is. And they say, "It's great, it's wonderful, the sun shines all day." Well, Nehemiah didn't get that. In fact, the news he got was pretty devastating. They said to me, "Things are not going well for those who return to the province of Judah. They are in great trouble and disgrace. The wall of Jerusalem has been torn down and the gates have been destroyed by fire." That's pretty grim news, isn't it? And of course, there were no pictures. He just had to kind of imagine what it had been like. And what was his reaction? When I heard this, I sat down and wept. I mean, he could have thought, "Oh, well, at least I'm here. At least I'm in the palace." But he wept. And in fact, in the language it was written in, which was Hebrew, it means a deep sadness when you're really, really heartbroken. Like if Forest get relegated. I'm going to try a football illustration. It'll fall to pieces, but I won't do that. No, but the real deep sorrow. And in ancient times, walls defined a city where it began and where it ended. The walls kept the enemies out, and it gave the people a sense of security. And without the wall, a city was vulnerable to looting and chaos and invasion. So imagine Jerusalem, its walls turned down, its gates burnt to a crisp, the city exposed to anyone who would harm it. This wasn't just a physical problem. It wasn't just about building. It was deeply emotional, even spiritual. See, to these people, the broken walls screamed defeat, disgrace and vulnerability. In fact, that word disgrace was used to them, and they said, "We're in disgrace." There's a lot of shame, and they were a proud people. It was a constant daily reminder that they weren't safe, that things weren't right, and they would have been saying, "Where's God? What's going on in all this?" So when Nehemiah heard this, he wouldn't have just been thinking about stones and gates. He was concerned for his people. For families who couldn't sleep at night because they feared an attack. For communities that couldn't rebuild their lives because there was no protection. Those demolished walls represented broken hope, broken lives, and a broken identity for God's people. And Nehemiah was speechless, but he knew where to turn. For days I mourned, I fasted. That meant he stopped having food so he could just give himself to prayer. And I prayed to the God of heaven, the God who's above it all. And Nehemiah recalls this prayer in his journal. And sometimes people's prayers are quite scripted and polite, aren't they? But this wasn't. It was raw. It was the cry of a man who was heartbroken, but he believed in a bigger story. He believed in a big God. He believed in God's purposes, even though everything was in chaos. And so he starts by lifting his eyes to God and affirming, "O Lord God of heaven, great and awesome God who keeps his covenant of unfailing love with those who love and obey his commandments." Now you may wonder what that word covenant means, but what it means is that God made a promise to be with his people. If they will be faithful to him, he will be faithful to them. They were the ones who'd broken it, who'd gone away. That's why they were in this situation in the first place. But God, I remember God, you're faithful. I'm holding on to that. And Nehemiah gets honest. He doesn't sugarcoat the blame. He confesses the hard truths. Because you know what we often do is we often blame people, don't we? People have asked me how my dad is because he was ill this week. And when I rang up my dad, he was blaming the government for everything that was wrong. I thought, oh yeah, you're all right, Dad. That's what we do, don't we? We blame the government, or we blame the council, or we blame someone. Nehemiah doesn't. He says, we have sinned. He's identifying himself with his people. Yes, even my own family. And I have sinned. That's interesting because it's always other people usually, isn't it? I have sinned. No excuses, no dodging responsibility, no blaming the people back home. He owned it. We're in this mess. I'm in this mess because of the choices we've made. But this is where his prayer turns. He doesn't say stuck in guilt. He clings to a promise. This is a promise God had made. And remember, God promised, that was what the covenant was all about. God promised to be faithful to them. It was a pledge God made to them. It was a relational thing. If you return to me and obey my commands and live by them, then even if you're exiled, that's the situation they were in. If you're exiled to the ends of the earth, I will bring you back to the place I've chosen for my name to be honoured. He's talking about the city of Jerusalem, the city where it was all going to happen, actually where Jesus was going to come, as we'll see later. In that moment, Nehemiah dared to believe that things could change, that God wasn't done with his people, that he could make the world around him a better place. And then he comes to the boldest part of his prayer. This is what we need to hold on to. Please grant me success today by making the king favourable to me. Now, that's not a small request. He was a man with a secure, comfortable palace job. I know it was edgy, but, he was right near the king. And he was going to use that position. He planned to talk to the king about it. And actually, the king had power over life and death. The king could have just said, go away and be executed, and that would have been it. Why risk all that? Because he couldn't ignore what was tugging at his heart, what was breaking it. He couldn't sit back in comfort while others suffered. He wanted to make the world around him a better place. And that moved him to step up. And he went back and he led the people. And it was hard and there were setbacks, but they did it. They made that city secure again. And you know what? This wasn't random. It was part of a bigger story. It was a step in God's plan that he was part of. See, decades before him, some other people had been stirred to rebuild the temple. That was the place where people worshipped God. But the temple was open to attack because the walls had been broken. So Nehemiah got it built up and the city was secure again. Fast forward 444 years and into that same city walks Jesus. He stands in the rebuilt temple and declares something amazing. He says, look, forget about this temple. I'm the temple. I'm going to be the place where people meet with God. I'm going to bring you to God. You don't need a building anymore. Now, Nehemiah couldn't see that. He couldn't see the full picture. But he was willing to step out of his comfort zone. And that made him part of the big story that would open the way for you and I to encounter God. And that's why I love the way that Nehemiah ends that first chapter of his story. After pouring out his heart, his broken heart to God, he says, in those days, I was the king's cupbearer. In other words, this was who I was. This was the influence I had. This was the opportunity God placed in my hand. And I'm going to use it to make the world around me a better place. I'm going to use it for God. He used what he had where he was to do something about his broken heart. And that made the world around him a better place. Because big changes start with small acts. Okay, well, let's go back to those questions we started off with. The first one people ask themselves is, how can I make my life better? Do I need to lose weight? Do I need to get out of debt? You probably do. Looking out there, I feel so virtuous. Some of you do need to lose weight, looking out there, yeah. I know. It's very self-righteous, isn't it? But it's been toil. Thank you, Michelle, my diet guru, as well. But you probably do. But actually, that's not the question. It's a valid question, but it's not the question that's going to make a difference. The question you need to ask is, how can I make the world around me a better place? And those two questions, as we saw, aren't so far apart as we think. Because if you want to become a better person, you need to make the world around you a better place. See, what really matters is how we show up for others, and that actually changes our whole outlook on life. That's not just a nice thought. For those of us who are Jesus followers, we can see actually that was the path that Jesus set into action. Jesus brought those ideas which were radical at the time. We take them for granted. See, he lived in a culture where power and status were prized. Humility was despised. Romans ruled them, and you had to just kind of fight your way to the top. And Jesus said, "The greatest among you will live as one who is called to serve others, because the greatest honor and authority is reserved for the one with a heart of a servant." And a heart of a servant is just having that heart to want to help people around you, to make the world a better place. And as Jesus followers, we're not just doing it because we want to be do-gooders. We're doing it because that's what Jesus did. And that shows people the reality of Jesus. Yeah, and if you're not a Jesus follower, you can walk this way, you can go this way. I'd encourage you to take the first step along this way. When we focus on helping people and making things better, we're stepping into something so much bigger than ourselves, a way of life that Jesus started. And if you're not a Jesus follower, you can start this today. But if you are, it's part of the package. Now, please don't think I'm asking the impossible, because I've kept saying big changes start with small acts. So drawing on Nehemiah's story, I want to give you 4 simple steps. And I've taken these just really from what Nehemiah's done here. 4 steps that will help make the world around you a better place. They're really simple. Nothing, no rocket science in it. Firstly, pay attention to what's tugging at your heart. That's what Nehemiah did, didn't he? His heart was broken. He didn't just ignore that. He didn't, put his earbuds in and listen to his music to try and drown it out, or just watch Netflix and forget about it all, mainly because they weren't there at that time. No, he did something about it. He knew there was something tugging at his heart, and he listened. Listen to your heart. What's really tugging at you? What's breaking your heart? And I know you watch the news and there are so many things, but I'm looking at something that's right in front of you, something in your neighborhood, a person that you know, a person who's struggling. And ask yourself, what step, and I say step deliberately, because you want to think of just a first step today, what step could you take to make a difference? Like Rosa Parks, one step. She just said that one little word, no. And that set that chain of events into action. Start small. Do one simple thing to move towards change. And remember, you're part of a bigger story. Now, I said I wanted to give you an example, and I just want to get a bit personal now. Now, about 11 years ago, I had like a kind of major mental health crisis. I don't know if it was a breakdown or what, but I was off sick for 6 months, and I was on medication, and it was kind of totally new to me. It was sparked off by something that happened, and it was a real struggle. And there was a Christian psychologist actually helped me through it. But I'll tell you what I found in that time, because when I was struggling, I found actually a lot of Christians weren't that sympathetic. I tried to confide in 2 people, because a couple of times I'd actually had suicidal thoughts. I wouldn't have done it, but I had suicidal thoughts. I remember walking out of my front door thinking, I could walk in front of that car right now. And that thought terrified me. I didn't dare tell anyone at the time, because I thought I might get sectioned or something, being a danger to myself. But I did confide in someone, a Christian who I trusted. 2 people actually, and the first one said, "Don't be stupid." That's what he said. And the second one said, "Oh, well, yeah, but don't forget other people are struggling and hurt." And that was it. Just wrote it off. Anyway, I'm really glad to tell you, there's a Christian psychologist called Debbie Hawker who kind of really helped me through that and got me through that. And I had a Christian GP. It was a real blessing to me, and I got through that. And then eventually, the Lord got me in that position where I came to this wonderful place, where it's been fantastic, and I really love it here. But when I first came, I was looking at what was going on in the community, and I was talking to someone who advised churches on what they did in the community, and he said, you must go and see this lady called Ruth Rice. Ruth Rice at that point was a minister of a Baptist church in West Bridgford. posh West Bridgeford she was in. And they said, she's got this mental health cafe. And I went and talked to Ruth, and it was kind of small at the time what she was doing. It was just in West Bridgeford. She'd had a bit of a breakdown, and she'd seen actually how bad it was with mental health, how bad Christians were, and she decided she needed to do something. So she set up what she called share safe spaces where it's okay not to be okay. Nothing massive. You just come together, and people come with their skills. They were the hosts, people were the guests, they were all together, and they supported one another. And then for anyone who wanted, there was a nice sort of gentle time of prayer with Christian input, but it was just so simple. I took some people from the church, and some of you might remember Fiona, a lady called Fiona. She really had a heart for it, and she had a real passion about mental health, and she was really concerned about the church's attitude towards mental health, and we started it here, and we had to take it one step at a time. So every Wednesday now, when you come in, we have our Renew Wellbeing, we get a group of people who come, and they come with their crafts. There's a prayer space for them. People chat to them, and it's just a lovely atmosphere. And other churches got interested, and there are now 4 Renew Wellbeing centres. Funny thing was, when we were starting it up, one of the churches had a Zoom call with me. This was in the lockdown, but they wanted to start it after lockdown. I won't say what church it was, but it was like the big established church in the country, so you can work it out from that. But Hazel was actually on the phone on the Zoom, because she's not that techie, I was at church, she was on the phone, and they didn't realise she was still on there, and she heard this bloke say, "Well, I don't want to get involved in some weird Baptist thing." But they did go for it, and there are 4 centres here, and it's just been wonderful. It doesn't solve the mental health crisis, but it has made the world a bit better for the people who come. And we had a bit of feedback from people. One lady said, I never would have gone back to my job had I not have had this space to come for. And there was a gentleman who he actually took his wife there who was struggling, and his wife gets involved in the crafts, and then he plays dominoes with people. In fact, he plays dominoes with one of the guests, that gives her a great confidence because she beats everyone hands down. She's a demon. I shouldn't call her a demon really, but she's a domino player. She's an awesome domino player. And he said, life has been so much different. For me, it's taken so much pressure because I can come here and I can be with people, and she's okay and she's safe, and they go to everyone in town. So, you can go to 4 out of 5 days a week. That all started actually with an unpleasant experience I had, a dissatisfaction I had about actually the way Christians viewed mental health, and actually, connecting with Ruth Rice, who actually had the same kind of issues and experienced a mental health crisis and thought something's got to be done. And it made the world better for some people. Just a little thing. It's not radical. It's not going to change the world. It's not going to get rid of nuclear weapons, but it's going to change the world around people. So if you're not sure what that looks like for you, that's okay. Because this is just the beginning. Because over the next few years, we're carrying on this series resolution, but what I want you to do now is just sit with that question. How do I make the world around me a better place? Because big changes start with small acts. I'm going to pray, and then ask the music group to come up as I pray. Heavenly Father, we thank you for your tender mercies. And we thank you that you don't call us to do impossible things, but you call us to take small steps that make the world for people around us a better place, that point towards something better, that point towards what you've given us in Jesus. And help us to kind of reorientate, instead of thinking what we want to do about our lives to make them better, to actually look at how we make things better for people so they glorify you. In the name of Jesus, amen.